and welcome back to Mariana Mass Books. My name is Mariana and today I am finally here with my Historathon book haul. So Historathon book haul just means this is a pile of history non-fiction books. If you follow my channel, then you know what Historathon is. If you don't, Historathon is a year-long reading event where we read non-fiction history. It was created 4 years ago by Vin at Revolt Reads. We divide the year, I'm saying we because I participate, not because I created the challenge. So we, all the participants, all the people who read for Historathon, we divide the year into 4 quarters. Chronologically. So each quarter corresponds to a specific time period, starting with quarter 1, which is from prehistory to 500, and then all the way to quarter 4, which is I think 1820 to current times. If you want the specifics, you can go check out Vin's announcement video. I will link it down below, as well as tagging the co-hosts of Historathon. Today I'm just going to show you a general history book haul. It's not going to be specific to any quarter. I love reading history and I love buying history books. I think the majority of the books I buy in paper are history books because when it comes to fiction, I mostly read on Kindle now. Actually, I would also read history on Kindle, but a lot of the books that I'm interested in are either not available on Kindle or because they have a lot of illustrations. I prefer to buy them on paper. Also, I buy a lot from Mexican independent presses or university presses, and often those books don't have ebook versions, so I buy them in paper. So the majority of books I buy in paper is history books, although if you watch my general haul video, which I did a couple of videos ago, I had a ton of books there and they were not history related except for one. So maybe I do still buy books and I just kid myself that I don't. Regardless, today we are going to see history paper books. If you have been following my Historathon reading, you know that I focus on Mexican history. I am Mexican, I do live in Mexico, so I do focus on Mexican history. So most of the books I have here are Mexican history books, although I also have a few others that are not Mexican. Actually, I have only 3 that are not Mexican history. All the rest are Mexican. So I will be explaining a bit some topics, not too in depth because I don't want to make this video super long. I always make long videos, but I don't want it to be too long. So I will explain a bit what each book is dealing with. So I'm going to start with the Mexican history books that are in Spanish. Then I'm going to do the Mexican history book that's available in English, and then I'm going to do the non-Mexican history books that are also in English. So that's how we're going to do it. Because a lot of the ones that I have are in Spanish, I am going to be explaining a bit on the surface the topics, and then when I read them, if I read them this year, because as I read from a comment that John Davies wrote, where he wrote, what even is a TBR in Historathon? So, I don't know if I'm going to read this year. I will have them in my history library to pick as a pile of possibilities for whatever quarter they are in. Oh my god, enough introduction, let's just go ahead with the books. The first book that I have here is part of a collection by historian Alejandro Rosas. It is called Once Upon a Time Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was the capital of the Aztecs, so to speak. Whenever I speak in English, I struggle because I feel like I'm not explaining properly, because of course you can't talk exactly about an Aztec empire. You can't talk exactly of like a capital or an emperor or all those topics or terms that we know in English, but they are the closest translations. So we could say it was like the capital of the Aztec Empire. And this is part of a collection by historian Alejandro Rosas, who started writing. There are other 2 volumes, and they are called Once Upon a Time Mexico. So the idea is that he takes topics that are maybe taught in school or that are maybe known within society, but that are actually myths, and so he explains them more realistically. Think, for instance, in the US. I'm going to use the US as an example because I did live for a couple of years in Boston, so I know some of the history that I was taught in school when I was in Boston, right? So, like, think of the history of Paul Revere, right? Those types of figures that become mythical almost, but then when you look at the actual history, it's very different from the legend that ends up being told. So that's the idea with these books. They are super beautiful books. As you can see, they are printed in 3 inks. I love books when they are printed in 2 or 3 inks. They are super elegant. So they have illustrations, they have different topics, they have it has a map of Tenochtitlan in the back. I do have a map of Tenochtitlan, a facsimile map from the 16th century, framed in my wall there. You can't see it. Let me see. I think it has also some illustrations. Yes, it has some illustrations. I lost the page and I don't want to make this video longer, so just trust me on this. It has illustrations also printed in 3 inks, so it's black, blue, and red, which are very Tenochtitlan colors. I dropped my book. This is why it's dangerous that I do book hauls. My hands, my motricity are not to be trusted. So moving along, I forgot to tell you the books are ordered in chronological order. So moving this along, we have an academic essay collection called The Book in New Spain. New Spain was the colony after the Spanish took over, and this is an essay collection published by the Department of Culture and the INA, which is the Institute devoted to archaeology, anthropology, history, and it is an essay collection, but academic essays from historians regarding the book in New Spain. This is a topic that interests me a lot. The history of the book, the history of the printing press. As you know or not, the first printing press in the Americas, in the American continent, was in Mexico City. And then I think the second one was in Puebla, which is where I live. In Puebla, we have the oldest public library in the American continent, which is the Palafoxiana. If you're ever in Puebla, you should come to Puebla if you're interested in Mexican history. If you're ever in Puebla, you can visit the Palafoxiana, which is the oldest public library in the American continent. Anyway, I'm super interested with the history of the books and the printing press because of the cultural, legal, religious, implications that it had in Mexico when the Spanish took over. They kind of wanted to make this land like a Catholic haven, a Christian haven, where they said, okay, this is going to be the land where we are going to keep it super pure. And so they, for the Spanish Inquisition and a lot of laws that were passed about what could be published, what couldn't be published. The type of literature that was published was very religious. So it's just a super interesting topic, and this is just essays about the book in New Spain. The next one is Mexican archaeology. So it's the history of Mexican archaeology. The title is Mexican Archaeology, Its Origins and Projections. And this is by my two favorite Mexican archaeologists, Leonardo López Luján and Eduardo Matos Moctezuma, and one of my favorite publishers when it comes to history and archaeology, El Colegio Nacional. They publish fantastic books. This is one of them. I think this one was released last year, and I wanted to buy it since I saw the presentation of the book. They do online transmissions in YouTube. They have a great YouTube channel in Spanish. So, and this one is also very elegant. Mexican editorial design is super elegant. Very different from, I feel like that's also very interesting as a graphic designer. I find it very interesting to see the different styles of editorial design in different countries, and also like what I find elegant is not necessarily the same thing that maybe others would find elegant, or what I find beautiful. Mexican editorial design is very simple, very precise, very editorial, very elegant. Look at the colors. The colors are also fantastic in terms of the theme of the book, but then look at the end papers. Hold on. Oh my god. Okay, yes, the end papers with these end papers, the red. This is printed on the cover because it's paperback, which is also very beautiful. But this is what I mean. These like clean, solid color end papers. I really love it. Of course, it has some illustrations, and the different chapters are about different moments in Mexican archaeology. So this spans from, I want to say, the 18th century. 17th. So this spans from the 17th century and then all the way to now, and its projections to the future. I find the history of archaeology super fascinating. Vin at Revenant Reads, he had a book haul recently where he talked about a book by Alexander von Humboldt, and I was telling him in the comments that Humboldt is a prominent figure in Mexican history. He did a lot of travels through Mexico, but I'm saying that because last year or the year before, for Historathon, I read a small book by the same publisher, El Colegio Nacional, which was the history of the discovery of the sculpture or the statue of the Coatlicue, which was an Aztec deity. Is one of the major monumental Aztec sculptures that we have that you can visit in Mexico City. I saw it live a few months ago. It's amazing. And the discovery is very interesting, and Alexander Humboldt is featured in the anecdotes. He didn't discover it, but it was buried, and then he came and he wanted to see it, so they unburied it, and it's a whole thing. They buried it so that the locals couldn't worship the deity anymore. I don't remember which religious order buried it, but it was buried in a convent. And then Humboldt came and he was like, I want to see it. So they unburied it so that he could see it. So he wrote a paper about it. Mexican archaeology is full of just really fun, interesting anecdotes. This next one is one of my most exciting finds. Although now that I'm seeing it, I don't know how much it is history, but it is about a historical figure. So you'll see. I think you'll find it interesting. Historathon, even if it's not necessarily a Historathon read per se, now that I'm realizing it. And it's a used book or an older book. I don't know if it's used because it's in excellent conditions, but it is an older out of print book that I came across in a stand of books that I discovered in one of the malls that I go to. That is not one of the newer malls. Here is like one of the older malls, so it's not one of the popular ones. But I go there because it's close to my home and there are very useful stores there. It's like a useful trip when you go there. Anyway, there is a book stand there that I had always seen. So it's just like a very unassuming book stand. And I had never paid attention to it because it just has like the latest new releases, very commercial, very commercial. I wasn't really interested. But one day I was walking and I saw pass and I was like, whoa, what's that book? And the cover looked super interesting. And it was a book about, I want to say also New Spain, but I don't remember what it, I think maybe it was New Spanish art or something, but it was a fantastic edition, just beautiful book. And when I saw it, it was just a treasure of a book. So I was like, I'm going to buy this. It was so expensive because it was an older edition of an older out of print special edition of a book. So I was like, wait, what is this place? And I started looking around. They have so many fantastic older history books, really niche topics. I really love when I find really niche topics that maybe I'm not interested in. I don't necessarily buy them, but when I find bookstores or book stands with really niche topics, you know that it's a very special place and they have a ton of history and politics. Anyway, I was looking through that stand because now, of course, that's something that I do whenever I go to that mall. You have to go to that stand. I have to go to that stand. So I was perusing and I came across this book. And this is a book that analyzes two novels written in the 19th century. Yes, I think it's 19th century, written about Xicotencatl the Young. Xicotencatl the Young, who is one of my favorite heroes in ancient Mexico. He was a Tlaxcalan hero. He was a Tlaxcalan general that wanted to fight the Spanish forces, the Castilians, the conquistadors, when they were going towards Tenochtitlan and they have to go through Tlaxcala. They had a big battle there. I'm not going to go into it, but Xicotencatl the Young, he wanted to fight them because he didn't trust them. But Xicotencatl the Old and other of the lords, I'm never sure what titles to use in English, they didn't want to fight them. They wanted to make an alliance with the Castilians. And we know how that ended up. I was watching a Pile of Possibilities for Quarter 1 by Saracen Salute, and he was talking about a battle where they almost, I think he was talking about Carthage, and he was talking about a battle where they could have won over the Romans, and for some reason they just didn't. They like backed, and the romance ended up winning. And I don't know, when I was listening to him, it sounded like one of those moments in history that it's one of those like what if moments where you think, why did they pull back, and what would have happened if they hadn't, right? So with Xicotencatl the Young, I get this same feeling. It is one of those what if moments, where I think, what if they had listened to him? How would things have turned out, right? Like, it's just very interesting, and he's one of my favorite heroes, and I want to read more about him because I haven't read a lot. Obviously, this is just like an analysis of two 19th century novels about him. If we know anything about the 19th century, is that it's not to be trusted in terms of their interpretation of history and the narratives they created. So it's not going to be like very historical, but I didn't know that these two novels existed, so I want to read this, and I want to look for those novels, and of course I want to read more history books about Xicotencatl the Young. So the next book is from a very indie press. It's not even a publishing house. It's a printing press, printing business that prints a lot of different things, different pamphlets, political stuff, and a lawyer that I follow in Instagram, she focuses a lot on social justice topics, and she is from Yucatan, which is an area of the country that receives a lot of racism. It's also an area of the country that receives a lot of tourism, so you might know it because Yucatan, the Yucatan Peninsula, is where the Mayan Riviera is, like that area. Anyway, this printing business is from Yucatan, and the historian is also from Yucatan, and this is the story of the forgotten wars between Mexico and Yucatan in 1842-1843. So it's called Deadly Country, The Forgotten Wars of Mexico and Yucatan, 1842-1843, by José Ángel Coyoc Cu. And she, Carla Escoffier, who is the lawyer that I follow, she recommended this one after refuting a video by a popular Mexican, not historian, but that he's famous for his history videos that he makes. And he made a video about Yucatan from a very not Yucatan perspective. Anyway, Carla made a video answering to that video and recommending this book for those of us who want to learn the actual history of Yucatan. I had no idea that Yucatan had tried to fight for independence. That's something we don't learn in school. So it's very short. It's just an introduction. It will be just an introduction to the topic. It's also a super beautiful book. It comes with a foldout. Look at this stamp that it has. I'm going to see if I can catch it in camera. It says books homemade books. So cool. And it has it has like images in between the chapters. And let me look for the foldout. There is like a map of the different battles that are going to be talked about in this book. And as I was saying, it's obviously just an introduction to the topic, but I look forward to reading more and looking for more books about this topic. The next one I'm going to talk about is super chunky. I'm going to see if I can lift it up, but it's also super cool, and it is also 19th century. Oh my god, it's so heavy, it's so chunky. Hold on, because I don't know if I can do this. I can do this, I believe in myself. It's this one. Cartoonists, precursor? Is precursor a word in English? Precursor cartoonists? No. So, the cartoonists that preceded the Mexican Revolution, Volume 1. I would have bought the 2 volumes, but they only had this one available. I don't even know if Volume 2 is out yet. Maybe it isn't. I'm going to look it up so I can buy it when it releases. This is also a publication of the Department of Culture and of the a state-run publishing house that is super cool, Fondo de Cultura Económica, and they publish fantastic history books by really well-respected academics, etc. So this is one of their books, and it is the cartoonist that preceded the Mexican Revolution, Volume 1, and Volume 1 is about El Hijo del Aguizote, which was a newspaper, what's it called? A newspaper that was against the regime. What would be the name of that type of newspaper? And the book is very chunky because at the end it has a ton of scans of the different cartoons that were published in that newspaper, that are like satirical cartoons of the government, critical of the government. There is a big history of cartoonists and satire in the printing press in Mexico. I would say the most famous would be Jose Guadalupe Posada. You probably know his image of the Catrina that I'm putting on screen. That actually, the first Catrina he did, the Catrina is that image of the skull, fancy woman skull with fancy clothes. And the first that he published was actually published in a newspaper that was against the regime. And the reason why it's dressed in fancy clothes is because it is making fun of the rich. So Jose Guadalupe Posada is probably the most famous, and then he went on to do other type of work, other type of art, but he did start out as making, printing or making his grabados. I never know how to say grabados in English for these types of satirical publications. So this again is a compilation of the newspaper El Hijo del Aguizote, which was one of those types of publications before the Mexican Revolution. This next book is so interesting. Every book I buy is so interesting, honestly. So this one, I do have the edition in Spanish, but it is available in English. So I'm going to show it, but then I'm going to look for the title in English. It's this one, and it's a book about art, history, and politics after or during the Second World War. I think I can explain it without looking for the version in English. I'll just look for the title after. So during the Second World War, Mexico had a privileged place in terms of foreign relations. So it was kind of like a time when both regimes were trying to make a presence in terms of ideology in Mexico, and they used art to do so. So this book analyzes the different artists, exhibits, cartoon characters, art movements that happened in Mexico that were instilled and that kind of competition, I guess. This is a very beautiful book because it also has a lot of pictures. Again, this is a Spanish edition, but there is an English edition available. Let me look for the title. Okay, so the title in English is Nelson Rockefeller, Pancho Pistolas, and Pablo Picasso Travel to Mexico. Okay, I will read the synopsis, but if you want, you can skip forward the synopsis in English. Nelson Rockefeller, Donald Duck, and Pablo Picasso travel to Mexico. The Society of Modern Art and changing patterns of art consumption in Mexico during the Second World War enjoyed the privileged position that its Ministry of Foreign Affairs skillfully leveraged. Both sides of the armed conflict, the Axis powers and the Allies, considered it a strategic partner. As a result, they deployed a whole range of resources, programs, and projects aimed at convincing the population that their vision for the future of humanity was the correct one. Both the Nazi and the American governments found cultural projects to be useful tool for swaying public opinion in their favor. This led to fabulous art exhibitions arriving in Mexico, including the best Picasso display ever shown in Mexico City. This is a story of what happened in the Federal District as seen from the perspective of the witnesses and authors of a crucial moment in relations between Mexico and the United States. I will link the website below where you can get it. I don't know if they ship internationally, but I'm assuming that maybe you can get it in the US because otherwise, why would they make an English version? And why would they add a buy book button, right? So I will link the website down below in case anyone is interested. And then finally, I'm going to quickly go over the 3 books that are not Mexican history. I'm going to try to quickly go over those. The first one is, I have an edition in Spanish, but it is translated also to English. I'm going to read to you the title in Spanish because this was actually super interesting because it pertains the Soviet Union. And the title in the US is very different or gives it a very different emphasis, and the synopsis is also written very differently because obviously for ideological reasons, whereas the Spanish title, I feel like it's not as charged in that sense. So it's in English, the title is the Avant-Gardists, in Spanish is Los Vanguardistas, and the subtitle in Spanish would be the Russian Revolution in Art. I don't remember the subtitle in English. And this is about the Russian Revolution in Art. So this is about the Russian vanguards, art movements. I never know what to call them in English. The 20th century vanguardias. What are they called in English? Anyway. So, Russia 1917. The Bolsheviks take power. Russia and the world will never be the same. 5 months after the triumph of the revolution, the new people in power named some artists like Kazimir Malevich, Vasily Kandinsky, Vladimir Tatlin, or Marc Chagall to occupy important posts in the recently created Commissariat of the People for Public Instruction. These avant-gardists pretended to transform the streets and plazas, the education, and ultimately the people themselves. However, their attempt to bring art to life didn't quite agree with didn't quite match with the interpretation of the Bolsheviks for a revolutionary culture, which made it so that it didn't take long for the trust between both to falter. So the author brings to life a vibrant depiction of a vibrant portrait of these exceptional artists and an unrepeatable of these exceptional artists and an era never to be seen again. Me simultaneously reading in Spanish and translating to English. So this one is very interesting, was very interesting to me because one, I love the Russian art style. I don't know what to call it in Spanish, but from the 20th century. In English. In Spanish, it's called constructivismo, and the Russian movements in general. Russian art movements have a huge influence in Mexican art. Ideologically, Mexico and the US are very different in that sense. I feel like the Soviet Union was much closer, and in art, a lot. I am not going to talk about it now because again, time. But there is a very important Mexican vanguardia that is directly inspired, I would say, by this style of art. Is called estudiantismo. If I can find the translation, I will put it on screen, and I will. A member of my family was like very prominent in that movement. It's a whole thing. Maybe I'll talk about it if I ever read this book. I always have the best of intentions to read the books I buy in a certain year, that year. But that never happens. And then the final two, I'm just going to really quickly show because the first one I already showed in my previous book haul, and it is The Art of the Grimoire, an illustrated history of magical books and spells. So, as it sounds, by Professor Owen Davies. Professor Owen Davies has a lot of different books around the topic. I also have his Oxford Illustrated History of Witchcraft and Magic. I find this type of history super cool. Also, I just wanted to say there are people who consider this not history because it revolves around the topic of witchcraft. But, why do you consider the history of Christianity history when it's also a belief, Like, there are a lot of atheists who will read history of Christianity and consider it a serious history topic because it is, but they won't read history of witchcraft because it's not. And I'm like, it's still just like a belief. So Owen Davies is not writing about how to do magic. He's writing about a historical analysis of the actual documents that exist in history where how people practiced magic. Whether you believe that magic is real or not is completely irrelevant, in the same way whether you're a Christian or not is completely irrelevant if you read the history of Christianity. You're not reading a book about how to do magic spells. You're reading a book about the history of the recorded history of those magic spells throughout history. Which, again, if you believe in them or not, is completely irrelevant. Anyway, so I do consider this a Historathon book. And finally, there is a book that will be a fit to show, and I will see if I can. It's an atlas, really quick. It's chunky, it's heavy. It's the Smithsonian History of the World map by map. That's as much as I can show you. It's really beautiful, super beautiful. You can Google it and look inside. tons of maps about different times in history of the world, map by map. And that will be my haul. I'm going to stop talking. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it was interesting. Hauls for me are super fun. I feel like people always say there isn't any value in hauls because you're just showing books and what good does that do. But like whenever I do hauls, I talk a lot about the books that I show, and either I talk personal anecdotes, where did I buy it, why did I buy it, or like this where I talk about history topics. I feel like book hauls are super interesting. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and in the meantime, I wish you happy reading.